The text message arrived at exactly 8:12 on the morning of my 35th birthday. I was standing in my kitchen, holding a mug of coffee I had already forgotten to drink, staring at rain sliding down the window. The message came from an unknown number. 5 words. Do you still remember? Then another message appeared. The train station. Noon. I frowned. For a second I thought it was spam, or a wrong number. Then a third message arrived, and my heart nearly stopped. Platform 3. Like we promised. The coffee slipped from my fingers. Fortunately, it landed on the counter instead of the floor, because at that moment I wasn't thinking about coffee, or work, or anything else. I was thinking about Clara Monroe, the girl I hadn't seen in 17 years, the girl I had once loved enough to write a letter for, the girl who disappeared from my life before either of us was brave enough to admit what we felt. I stared at the screen, then read the messages again, and again. The train station. Platform 3. Like we promised. Promise I hadn't thought about in years. At least that's what I told myself. The truth was more embarrassing. I had thought about it every birthday since turning 18. Not constantly, not obsessively. Just enough. Just enough to wonder. Just enough to imagine. Just enough to ask myself the same question every year. What happened to Clara Monroe? My name is Julian Hart. I turned 35 years old that morning. I lived alone in Cincinnati, Ohio. I designed commercial buildings for a small architecture firm. My apartment overlooked the river. My refrigerator contained exactly 3 eggs, a bottle of orange juice, and enough expired sauces to start a museum. By every reasonable definition, my life was fine. Not exciting. Not terrible. Fine. Which is a dangerous word, because people often use fine when they mean lonely, and lonely when they mean afraid. I had dated. A lot, actually. There was Emily, Rachel, Sophia. A disastrous 6-month relationship with a yoga instructor who believed celery juice could solve emotional trauma. None of them lasted. Not because they were bad people. Because none of them were Clara. And that's unfair. I know it is. But some people leave fingerprints on your heart. Years later, you're still comparing everyone else to a ghost. I looked at the message again. Then at the clock. 11:07 a.m. Noon was less than an hour away. My rational brain immediately presented several excellent arguments. Don't go. It's probably a joke. It's probably not Clara. You're 35 years old. Act like it. Unfortunately, my heart had already found my car keys. The drive to the station took 23 minutes. 23 minutes of arguing with myself. The entire way there, I kept expecting another message. Something that would explain everything. Or cancel it. Or tell me I'd misunderstood. Nothing came. Just rain. The steady kind that turns traffic lights blurry and makes every windshield look like a watercolor painting. By the time I parked, my stomach felt ridiculous. I was 35 years old. I had presented architectural proposals to rooms full of investors, negotiated contracts worth millions, given speeches, handled emergencies. Yet somehow, walking into an old train station terrified me. Platform 3 looked exactly the same. That was the first thing I noticed. The old iron benches, the giant clock hanging above the platform, the faded brick walls. Even the vending machine near the entrance somehow seemed immortal. Time had moved. The station hadn't. For a second I simply stood there, looking, remembering. 17 years disappeared. I was 18 again. Clara was beside me, laughing, mocking my terrible haircut, stealing my fries, making every ordinary day feel important. Then reality returned, and I saw her, standing beneath the clock, holding a folded letter. My letter. The world stopped. Not dramatically, not like in movies. More quietly than that, like someone had reached into my chest and pressed pause. Clara Monroe. Older. Different. Beautiful. Her chestnut hair rested against her shoulders. A beige coat wrapped around her frame. There were small lines beside her eyes now. The kind that come from living. The kind that somehow made her even more beautiful. For a moment she didn't see me. She was staring at the letter. running her thumb across the folded edge. Then she looked up, and our eyes met. Neither of us moved. Neither of us smiled. Neither of us seemed capable of breathing. 17 years. Gone in a single second. Clara spoke first. "You're late." I looked at the giant clock. 12:01. I laughed. 1 minute. One stupid minute. And somehow hearing her tease me again felt like stepping into a time machine. She smiled. The real smile. The one I'd spent years trying to forget. The one I'd never actually forgotten. "Hi, Julian." My name sounded different in her voice. Familiar. Dangerous. I swallowed. "Hi, Clara." For a second, neither of us knew what came next. Because what exactly do you say to someone who once meant everything? Someone you haven't seen in 17 years? Someone you've accidentally loved for half your life? Apparently, nothing. Because we just stood there staring at each other. Like two idiots. Clara finally laughed. And suddenly I was 18 again. "You still do that?" "What?" "Stare when you're nervous." Pointed at her. "You still notice." Her smile softened. "I remember a lot." The words landed harder than they should have. Because they sounded honest. Painfully honest. Then she lifted the folded letter. The paper looked ancient now. Yellowed at the edges. Worn from years of being opened and closed. Protected. Treasured. My stomach tightened. "You kept it." Clara looked down at the letter. Then back at me. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I saw nervousness in her eyes. Real nervousness. The kind that belongs to someone who cares about the answer. "Every year," she said quietly. I frowned. "What?" She took a breath. Then held up the letter. "Every birthday." A pause. "I read it every year." And suddenly, I wasn't sure my heart remembered how to beat anymore. "Every birthday," she said quietly. "I read it every year." I stared at the letter. Then at her. Then back at the letter again. The paper looked fragile now. Like it had survived things. Moves. Apartments. Heartbreaks. Entire chapters of a life I knew nothing about. And somehow, it was still here. "So you actually kept it." Clara laughed softly. "You sound surprised." "I am surprised." Her eyebrows lifted. "You gave it to me. I was 18. Exactly. Fair point. 18-year-old me had done many questionable things. Writing heartfelt letters ranked surprisingly low on the list. Still, the fact that she had carried it for 17 years felt impossible. Clara looked down at the paper. A smile touched her lips. "You remember what it said?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "Not entirely. Bits and pieces. Fragments." I remembered writing it during our last summer together. The night before she left for college. The night neither of us wanted to talk about goodbye. Clara unfolded the letter carefully, like opening something sacred. Then she read aloud. "If you're reading this years from now." Her voice caught slightly. "I hope you're happy." The station suddenly felt much quieter. "I hope someone tells you you're beautiful even when you're being stubborn." I groaned immediately. "Oh no." Clara laughed. "Oh yes." Covered my face. "I actually wrote that?" "You absolutely did. This is painful. It gets worse. Wonderful. Just wonderful." She kept reading. "I hope you travel somewhere amazing." A pause. "I hope you do something brave." Another pause. Then her voice softened. "And if life somehow brings us back to this station when we're 35. My stomach tightened. Because suddenly I remembered that part. Every word. Clara continued. "Then maybe we'll finally stop pretending." Silence. The words hung between us. Heavy. Real. 17 years old. And somehow I had known exactly what I meant. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then Clara folded the letter again. Slowly. Carefully. Like she needed a moment. I needed one too. Finally I cleared my throat. "So." She looked up. "So." I shoved my hands into my pockets. Terrible habit. One she immediately noticed. Of course she did. "You still do that." I sighed. "Please stop remembering everything." Her smile widened. "No." The answer came too quickly. Too honestly. And something about that made my chest hurt. Not in a bad way. In the way old feelings hurt when they realize they're still alive. Then Clara glanced around the platform and laughed quietly. What? She pointed toward an old bench. The same bench. The exact same bench. My breath caught, because suddenly I remembered. The promise. Not the letter. The promise. We had been sitting there, sharing terrible vending machine cookies, watching trains come and go, talking about the future like it wasn't terrifying. I remember now. Clara nodded. I know. You said we'd both become famous. You said you'd design skyscrapers. I smiled. You said you'd write novels. Her expression softened. I tried. Something in her voice made me pause, because suddenly I realized something. I knew almost nothing about the last 17 years. Nothing about her successes, her failures, her heartbreaks. Nothing. And somehow that felt wrong. Like finding a book you loved and discovering half the pages were missing. I sat down on the bench. The old metal creaked beneath me. Clara sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Neither of us moved away. The rain tapped gently against the station roof. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since noon. Why today? Clara looked at the letter, then at me, then back at the letter again. And suddenly, the smile disappeared, replaced by something far more vulnerable, far more dangerous. She took a slow breath, and quietly said, because I almost didn't come. My heart dropped. Immediately, because I knew that voice. The voice people use before telling the truth. The kind of truth that changes everything. Because I almost didn't come. The words landed harder than I expected. I turned toward her. What do you mean? Clara stared at the folded letter in her hands. Not looking at me. Not yet. The rain continued tapping against the station roof. People moved through the platform. A train arrived somewhere in the distance. Yet somehow everything felt quiet. Very quiet. Clara smiled sadly. You know what the worst part about promises is? I shook my head. What? They survive. The answer caught me off guard. She laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Because she was nervous. I spent years trying to forget this place. A pause. Trying to forget the promise. Another pause. Trying to forget you. My chest tightened. Not because the words hurt. Because they sounded familiar. Because I had spent years doing exactly the same thing. Clara looked down. I dated people. I nodded. Me too. She smiled. I know. Of course she knew. Small towns have long memories. Mutual friends talk. Social media exists. People leave traces. Clara continued. I got close once. The way she said it made me pay attention. Very close. I almost got married. My stomach immediately dropped. There it was. The thing I hadn't wanted to hear. The thing I'd been afraid to hear since I walked into the station. I kept my expression neutral. Or tried to. Apparently not very well. Because Clara laughed. Tiny laugh. A sad one. You still make that face. What face? The one where you're pretending you're fine. Ouch. I looked away. She wasn't wrong. Never had been. Clara folded her arms. And for the first time all day she looked genuinely uncomfortable. Not because of me. Because of the memory. He proposed. A pause. I said yes. The station blurred slightly around the edges. Not because I was surprised. Because I wasn't. Of course someone had proposed to Clara Monroe. Anyone with functioning eyes would have proposed to Clara Monroe. The surprising part was how much it still bothered me. Even 17 years later, Clara stared at the floor. I bought a dress. A pause. We picked a venue. Another pause. Then she smiled sadly. And every time somebody asked if I was excited, her voice softened. I thought about someone else. My heart stopped. Not skipped. Stopped. Completely. I looked at her. Slowly. Carefully. She still wasn't looking at me. Because she didn't have to. She already knew. She had always known. The realization hit me like a train. All those years. All those birthdays. All those relationships. And somehow, We had both been carrying the same ghost. Clara swallowed. I hated myself for it. The honesty in her voice was brutal. I wanted to love him the way he deserved. A tear appeared in the corner of her eye. I really tried. I stayed silent. What else could I do? She continued. But every time I pictured the future, a shaky breath. I pictured this station. The platform suddenly felt very small, very personal, very dangerous. Clara finally looked at me, her eyes shining, not from happiness, from years of things left unsaid. I broke off the engagement 6 months before the wedding. I blinked, slowly, because that was not the story I expected. Clara laughed once, a broken little laugh. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. I almost smiled. Almost. My aunt called me irresponsible. Another pause. My cousin called me brave. That sounded about right. Clara looked at the letter again, then held it out toward me. Do you know what I did that night? I shook my head. She smiled. A very small smile. I read this. My throat tightened. Immediately, I sat on my apartment floor. She was talking about now. About today. About us. Julian. The way she said my name made my chest tighten. Yeah. She looked directly into my eyes. No jokes. No defenses. No pretending. Just truth. And quietly asked, tell me honestly. A pause. A terrifying pause. Then, did you ever stop loving me? And just like that, every safe answer disappeared. Did you ever stop loving me? The question hit harder than anything she'd said all day. Harder than the engagement. Harder than the letter. Harder than seeing her standing beneath that clock. Because suddenly there was nowhere left to hide. No jokes. No nostalgia. No safe stories about the past. Just the truth. I looked at Clara. Really looked at her. The woman who had somehow survived 17 years in my head. The woman sitting beside me now. Waiting. Terrified. Hopeful. I laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Because I couldn't believe she was asking. Clara. Her fingers tightened around the letter. Yeah. I shook my head. You seriously don't know? The vulnerability in her eyes answered for her. No. She didn't know. Not really. Maybe she'd hoped. Maybe she'd guessed. But knowing and hoping aren't the same thing. I looked toward the tracks, trying to find words big enough. Failing. Then I gave up and told the truth. The last woman I dated. Clara stayed silent, listening. We were together for almost 2 years. A pause. She asked me why I always looked sad on my birthday. Clara's expression softened. I continued. I told her birthdays made me think about getting older. Another pause. That was a lie. Clara swallowed. I looked back at her. The truth was. A slow breath. I always wondered if you would come. The station disappeared. Everything disappeared. Except her eyes. They immediately filled with tears. Real tears. The kind people try desperately to hide. I kept going. Because if I stopped now, I'd never finish. Every birthday. A pause. Every year. Another pause. I'd think about platform 3. Clara covered her mouth. I could actually see her trying not to cry. It wasn't working. I'd wonder where you were. I smiled sadly. If you were happy. Another pause. If somebody had figured out how lucky they were. Her eyes closed. Just for a second. Then opened again. Brighter than before. Wetter than before. More honest than before. And suddenly I wasn't 35. I wasn't sitting in a train station. I wasn't talking about old letters. I was finally saying something I should have said 17 years ago. No. My voice came out rough. Steady. But rough. No, Clara. Silence. Then, I never stopped. The words landed between us. Simple. Uncomplicated. 17 years late. Clara stared at me. Not moving. Not blinking. Then one tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. Followed by another. And another. I immediately reached for her. Without thinking. Without hesitation. My thumb brushed the tears away. She laughed through them. A shaky, beautiful laugh. This is embarrassing. No. It really is. No. A smile appeared. Tiny, fragile, beautiful. Then Clara did something unexpected. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against mine, right there on the old station bench. Just like that, neither of us cared who saw. Neither of us cared about anything anymore. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I loved you too. My eyes closed. Immediately, because after 17 years, after missed chances, after bad timing, after other relationships, after entire lives lived apart, those 4 words felt impossible. She laughed again, a breathless little laugh. You know what's ridiculous? What? We wasted 17 years. I smiled, against her forehead. That's true. We're idiots. Also true. We should have done this a long time ago. I nodded. Definitely true. She pulled back slightly, just enough to look at me, and suddenly, the expression on her face changed. The sadness was gone. The fear was gone. In their place was something else. Something hopeful. Something dangerous. Something that looked a lot like happiness. Then she smiled, and quietly said, So, I already knew that tone. What? Her smile widened. We've established we're both in love. I laughed. Apparently. And we've established we're both single. Also apparently. Clara held up the old letter, then tilted her head, and asked the question that made my heart completely lose control. So does this count as our first date? Or our second chance? So does this count as our first date? Or our second chance? I laughed, mostly because my heart was trying to escape through my ribs. Clara smiled, the dangerous smile, the one that had gotten me into trouble since I was 16. I looked at the old letter, then at her, then back at the letter. I think it's both. She nodded thoughtfully. Good answer. I've had 17 years to prepare. Clearly. For a moment we simply sat there smiling at each other. Neither of us in any hurry to move. Neither of us interested in pretending anymore. The rain had softened outside. The station felt warmer somehow. Or maybe that was just Clara. Then she looked down at her watch and groaned. What? She covered her face. Oh no. My stomach immediately tightened. What? I forgot. Forgot what? Her expression turned into something between panic and embarrassment. Then she laughed. A genuine laugh. The kind that made people around her smile without understanding why. I was supposed to be somewhere. I blinked. Today. Today. What kind of somewhere? Clara pointed at herself. 34-year-old professional woman somewhere. That didn't help. At all. She sighed dramatically. I told my boss I had a dentist appointment. I frowned. You lied. I prefer strategic scheduling. I laughed. Clara. What? You skipped work. She pointed the folded letter at me. I came to a train station carrying a 17-year-old love letter. Fair. Very fair. She continued. If I had told my boss the truth, she'd have followed me. Why? Because she's invested. I laughed. Invested? Deeply. How deeply? Clara thought for a second, then answered. She once made a spreadsheet about my dating life. I nearly choked. No. Yes. That's insane. It was color-coded. I laughed so hard people actually turned around. And suddenly everything felt easy. Not because the past had disappeared. Because it hadn't. There were still 17 years between us. Thousands of days. Hundreds of stories. Entire versions of ourselves we'd never known. But for the first time, that didn't scare me. Felt exciting. I wanted those stories. All of them. Then Clara stood. I frowned. Where are you going? She looked down at me. The smile still there. Julian. Yeah. You promised me something when you were 18. Oh, that tone again. What? She folded her arms. You said if we ever met here again. My stomach immediately tightened, because suddenly I remembered. Not the letter. Something else. Something far more embarrassing. Clara saw recognition appear on my face, and instantly started grinning. No. Oh yes. No. Oh yes. I buried my face in my hands. Because I remembered perfectly. 17 years ago. 2 stupid teenagers. 1 impossible promise. And 1 terrible idea. Clara laughed. You remember. Unfortunately, I did. If we meet again at 35. She quoted from memory. You owe me dinner at Romano's. I groaned. The old Italian restaurant. The one we'd loved as teenagers. The one that somehow still existed. Clara pointed toward the exit. Come on. I stood, still laughing. You remembered that? Her eyebrows lifted. Julian. A pause. I remembered everything. The words hit differently now. Not painful. Not bittersweet. Just honest. And maybe that was enough. Maybe after 17 years. Honest was exactly what we needed. So together we walked toward the station doors. The rain had almost stopped. The clouds were beginning to break. Sunlight peeked through the gray sky. Clara slipped her hand into mine. Naturally. Like she'd done it 1,000 times. Like she'd never stopped. I looked down at our hands. Then at her. She caught me staring. Again. You still do that. What? Look at me like you're surprised I'm real. I smiled. Because she was right. Part of me was still surprised. After all these years. After all those birthdays. After all those what-ifs. She was finally here. And for the first time in 17 years, the future felt a lot more interesting than the past. The drive to Romano's took 15 minutes. 15 minutes during which neither of us stopped smiling. Not because we were trying to be romantic. Because every conversation somehow turned ridiculous. Exactly the way it used to. Clara sat in the passenger seat with the old letter resting in her lap. Every now and then I'd catch her looking at it. Then at me. Then pretending she hadn't. The restaurant looked almost identical. Red brick exterior. The same crooked sign. The same giant flower pots near the entrance. Parked. Neither of us got out immediately. For a second we simply sat there, listening to the rain tick against the windshield. Then Clara laughed. What? This feels weird. I nodded. Very. Like we're living inside one of those stories people make up after too much wine. I smiled. Except we're sober. Barely. We finally stepped outside. The rain had stopped completely. The air smelled clean. Fresh. New. Inside, Romano's was nearly empty. The hostess led us to a booth near the back. And the second we sat down, both of us froze. The booth. The exact booth. Number 12. The one we'd always asked for. Clara immediately pointed. No way. I laughed. No way. She looked around. Then at me. Then at the booth. Julian. Yeah. This is getting suspicious. I nodded. Very suspicious. The hostess smiled. You two okay? Clara immediately answered. We had our first date here. The words caught me off guard. First date. Not first almost relationship. Not first friendship. Not first heartbreak. Date. The hostess smiled. Then walked away, leaving me staring at Clara. She noticed. What? You called it a date. Her cheeks immediately turned pink. A rare sight. Very rare. And therefore extremely dangerous. For once Clara Monroe was speechless. I enjoyed it far more than I should have. Eventually she pointed at the menu. Read. I'm reading. Read harder. I laughed. And just like that the awkwardness disappeared. Again. Dinner felt easy. Comfortable. The way conversations feel when you've known someone forever. We talked about college. Jobs. Terrible relationships. Travel. Family. Everything. And somehow, 3 hours disappeared. At one point Clara showed me a photo of her dog. At another point I showed her a picture of a building I'd designed. She pretended to be impressed. Very badly. Then somewhere between dessert and coffee, the conversation changed. Not dramatically. Quietly. The way important things usually do. Clara stared into her coffee. Then softly asked, Can I tell you something? I nodded. Anything. She smiled. Then immediately looked nervous. Which made me nervous. Because Clara didn't get nervous. Not often. Finally she took a breath. And said, For a long time. A pause. I hated birthdays. The answer surprised me. What? She looked up, a sad smile on her face. After we lost touch, my chest tightened. Immediately, Clara continued. Every year I'd tell myself I wasn't going to think about you. Another pause. I'd make plans. Keep busy. Go out. Travel. She laughed softly. And every single year, her eyes found mine. I'd wonder if you remembered. Silence. The restaurant disappeared. Everything disappeared. Except that sentence. Because it was the exact same thing I'd been doing. For 17 years. Clara shook her head. We could have saved ourselves so much time. I smiled sadly. Probably. We're idiots. Definitely. A tear appeared in the corner of her eye. Not from sadness. Not entirely. Something more complicated. Something closer to relief. Then she whispered, I thought I'd missed my chance. The words hit harder than I expected. Because deep down, I thought exactly the same thing. Every year, every birthday, every relationship that didn't work. Every moment I convinced myself she was gone forever. I reached across the table, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Our fingers intertwined naturally, like they belonged there. Then I said the thing I'd been thinking all afternoon. The thing that suddenly felt impossible not to say. Clara. She looked up. Yeah. I smiled. A nervous smile. The kind I hadn't worn in years. I don't want another 17 years. Her eyes widened. Just slightly. Enough. I squeezed her hand. Then quietly added. I think we've already waited long enough. I don't want another 17 years. Clara stared at me. For a second she didn't blink. Didn't speak. Didn't move. The restaurant noise faded into the background. The clinking glasses. The distant conversations. The soft music playing overhead. None of it seemed real anymore. Only her. Only us. Only this moment. Then Clara laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Because she was trying very hard not to cry. Again. Good. The word came out almost as a whisper. Good. She nodded. Very slowly. Then squeezed my hand. Because I don't think I could survive another 17 years of wondering. My chest tightened. The honesty in her voice left no room for doubt. No room for pretending. No room for safety. Just truth. Finally, after all this time, the waitress arrived with the check. Neither of us even looked at it. She placed it on the table and immediately smiled. You two seem happy. Clara laughed. That's one word for it. The waitress pointed at us. I've been watching from across the room. Oh no. Oh yes. I buried my face in my hand. Clara started laughing. The waitress grinned. You look like two people who finally figured something out. Then she walked away, leaving us both speechless. For a second. Then Clara smiled. She isn't wrong. No. Not even a little. The check remained untouched between us. Neither of us seemed interested in ending the evening. Which was a problem. Because eventually evenings end. People go home. Reality returns. And suddenly I didn't want reality. Not yet. Clara glanced out the window. The sky was turning orange. Sunlight breaking through the clouds. Then she looked back at me. A strange expression crossing her face. What? She hesitated. Then smiled. There's one more thing. Immediately dangerous. What? Clara reached into her purse. And pulled out something else. Not the letter. A photograph. Old. Faded. The edges worn from time. She handed it to me. I looked down. And froze. Because I remembered it instantly. The county fair. Summer before college. The last summer. We were standing beside the Ferris wheel. Clara was laughing. I was looking at her. Not the camera. Her. My stomach dropped. Slowly. Very slowly. On the back of the photograph was a date. And underneath it, a sentence written in Clara's handwriting. I turned it over. And read. This is the day I realized I loved you. The restaurant disappeared. My heartbeat didn't. It became louder. Much louder. I looked up. Clara's eyes immediately dropped to the table. For the first time all day, The fearless Clara Monroe looked terrified. I wrote that 17 years ago. Her voice was barely audible. I never showed you. I stared at the photo again, then at her, then back at the photo, because suddenly I understood something. I wasn't the only one carrying memories. I wasn't the only one holding on. I wasn't the only idiot. Not even close. A smile slowly appeared on my face. Then another. Then a laugh escaped before I could stop it. Clara frowned. What? I shook my head. What? She pointed at me. Why are you laughing? I carefully pulled my wallet from my pocket, opened it, and removed a folded piece of paper. Old, worn, protected. The expression on her face changed instantly. No. Oh yes. No. Oh yes. I handed it to her. Her eyes widened, because she recognized it immediately. The paper she had given me the night before leaving for college. The one she'd probably forgotten. The one I'd never thrown away. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. Then she found the line. The sentence she had circled. The sentence I'd read 1,000 times. The sentence that had ruined every attempt to forget her. And written beside it, in 18-year-old Julian's handwriting, were 4 simple words. I love you too. Clara looked up at me, completely speechless. And suddenly, 17 years didn't feel like enough time to explain everything we'd missed. I love you too. Clara stared at the words, then stared at me, then back at the paper, again and again, like her brain refused to process what she was seeing. Finally, she looked up. You wrote this. I laughed, a nervous laugh. Apparently. Julian. What? Her voice cracked, actually cracked, and suddenly I realized she was crying. Not a little, not politely, really crying. The kind of tears people spend years earning. You kept this. There it was again. The same question we'd been asking each other all day. You kept this? You remembered? You waited? You loved me too? I smiled softly. Every move. A pause. Every apartment. Another pause. Every city. Her hand flew to her mouth. I continued. Once I almost threw it away. Her eyes widened. You what? I know. Julian. It was a cleaning phase. Those are dangerous. I learned that. She laughed through tears, then looked back down at the note. The old paper shook slightly in her hands. Not because of age. Because of emotion. Then she whispered. We were unbelievable. I smiled. We were idiots. No. She shook her head, a small smile appearing. We were in love. The simplicity of it hit harder than anything else. Not dramatic. Not tragic. Not complicated. Just true. We had been in love. 2 teenagers. Too scared to say it. Too scared to risk losing each other. And somehow, that fear had cost us 17 years. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Clara looked up and asked the question that had clearly been waiting inside her for years. Why didn't you tell me? The answer came immediately, because I'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. I thought you'd leave. Her expression softened. I continued. I thought if I said it out loud. A pause. And you didn't feel the same way. Another pause. I'd lose you completely. Clara closed her eyes, because she understood perfectly. I thought the same thing. Of course she did. That was the tragedy. Neither of us had been rejected. Neither of us had stopped loving the other. Neither of us had moved on. We had simply been afraid. The realization was almost insulting. 17 years. Destroyed by 2 terrified teenagers. Clara suddenly laughed. A real laugh. One that caught me completely off guard. What? She pointed at us. This. What about it? We're 35. I nodded. And? She laughed harder. We could have solved this entire story with one conversation. Couldn't even argue. Because she was right. Completely right. We sat there laughing until tears mixed with tears. Until the weight of 17 years became something lighter. Something survivable. Eventually the restaurant emptied. The sun disappeared. The lights outside flickered on. And still neither of us wanted to leave. Then Clara glanced at the photograph. Then at the letter. then at me, a strange smile appearing, the kind that usually meant trouble. What? She tilted her head. Come with me. Immediately dangerous. Where? You'll see. That's not an answer. It wasn't supposed to be. I paid the check. Mostly because arguing with Clara had never worked. Then we walked outside. The evening air was cool. The streets still damp from the rain. Clara led the way, confidently, like she knew exactly where we were going. 10 minutes later we stopped, and my heart almost stopped too, because standing in front of us was the old Ferris wheel, the same one from the photograph, the same county fair, the same place where we'd taken the picture 17 years earlier. I looked at her, then at the Ferris wheel, then back at her. No. Oh yes. Clara. Julian. Please tell me this isn't what I think it is. Her grin widened. The dangerous grin. The 18-year-old grin. The one I'd never recovered from. Then she reached for my hand, and quietly said, "The last time we were here." A pause. I realized I loved you. Her fingers intertwined with mine, and her voice softened. Maybe this time. She looked directly into my eyes. We stop running from it. Maybe this time. We stop running from it. For a second I couldn't speak. The Ferris wheel lights reflected in Clara's eyes. Blue, gold, white. The same colors I remembered from 17 years ago. Only now we weren't teenagers pretending not to be in love. Now we knew. And somehow that was even scarier. Clara squeezed my hand. You look nervous. I laughed. You just brought me to the exact place where my life went wrong. Her eyebrows lifted. Wrong. Pointed at her. You. She gasped dramatically. Excuse me? You've been ruining my decision-making since 2007. She laughed. And just hearing that laugh made everything feel lighter. The fairgrounds were quieter than I remembered. Families wandered between food stands. Children ran past holding balloons. Music drifted through the evening air. Life moving forward, just like it always had. The Ferris wheel operator waved us over. 2. Clara immediately answered. 2. I didn't even get a vote. Typical. 5 minutes later we were slowly rising above the fairgrounds. The city lights spreading beneath us. The sky turning dark. For a while neither of us spoke. We just looked out the window, the same way we had years ago. Then Clara smiled. Do you remember what happened last time? Unfortunately, I did. Which part? The Ferris wheel stopping. I groaned. Immediately. Oh no. Oh yes. The memory returned. Teenage Julian. Teenage Clara. The Ferris wheel stopping at the very top. 30 minutes. No movement. No escape. An 18-year-old me being too terrified to make a move. Clara laughed. You were sweating. It was hot. It was October. It was emotionally hot. That only made her laugh harder. Then her smile softened. I wanted you to kiss me. My brain stopped. Completely. What? She nodded. Very casually. Far too casually. I wanted you to kiss me. I stared at her. 17 years later? Yes. Now you tell me? Correct. Covered my face. Because apparently every memory from my youth was becoming more embarrassing by the minute. Clara leaned against the side of the cabin, watching me, smiling. Then she quietly added, I would have said yes. My heart nearly exploded, because deep down, I'd always wondered. The Ferris wheel continued climbing, higher, higher, until finally we reached the top. The city spread beneath us like a sea of lights, beautiful, quiet, almost unreal. And then, the Ferris wheel stopped. Clara blinked. I blinked. The operator's voice crackled over a speaker. Brief delay, folks. For 1 second we stared at each other, then simultaneously burst out laughing. No way. No way. Clara was practically crying. 17 years. I nodded. 17 years. And we're stuck up here again. I pointed toward the universe. This feels targeted. It really does. The laughter slowly faded. The silence that followed felt different. Not awkward. Not uncertain. Comfortable. Like home. Clara looked out across the city, then quietly said, "I used to imagine this." "What?" "This exact moment." The softness in her voice made me turn toward her. She wasn't looking at me. Not yet. She was looking at the lights. At the future. Something. "I'd wonder where you were." A pause. "If you were happy." Another pause. "If you ever thought about me." I reached for her hand. She immediately intertwined her fingers with mine. Naturally. Like she'd been waiting for it. Then she finally looked at me. And smiled. A smile more beautiful than anything I'd seen all day. "Turns out you were wondering the same thing." I nodded. "Every year." Her eyes shimmered. The lights reflecting in them. The emotion reflecting in them. Everything reflecting in them. Then she whispered, "I wish we hadn't lost all that time." The words hit hard. Because I wished the same thing. 17 years. Gone. Gone forever. Nothing could change that. Nothing could give it back. I looked at Clara. The woman I should have kissed years ago. The woman I'd somehow found again. Then I smiled. A real smile. And quietly said, "Maybe." She frowned slightly. "Maybe." I squeezed her hand. "We lost 17 years. A pause. "But Clara." Another pause. "We didn't lose today." The tears came immediately. Not sad tears. Something better. Something brighter. And before I could say another word, she kissed me. Not carefully. Not nervously. Not like people afraid of losing each other. Like people who already had. And had finally found their way back. The city disappeared. The Ferris wheel disappeared. The 17 years disappeared. There was only Clara. Only now. Only us. And for the first time in a very long time, neither of us was looking backward anymore. For a while, neither of us said anything. The Ferris wheel slowly began moving again. The city lights drifted beneath us. The world returned. But something had changed. Not around us. Inside us. The uncertainty was gone. The wondering was gone. 17 years of questions had finally found answers. Clara rested her head against my shoulder. And for the first time all day, neither of us felt the need to fill the silence. It was enough just being there. Together. Eventually the ride ended. Reality returned. The cabin door opened. The operator smiled. "Better luck this time?" Clara immediately laughed. I nearly walked into a railing. Because somehow, even complete strangers seemed invested in our story. We stepped back onto the fairgrounds. The night air felt warmer now. Or maybe I did. Clara slipped her hand into mine. Again. Naturally. Like she'd done it every day for years. Like she belonged there. We wandered through the fair without any real destination. Sharing funnel cake. Arguing about music. Mocking each other's teenage fashion choices. Discovering that despite 17 years apart, we still understood each other frighteningly well. Then something happened. Something small, but important. We passed a photo booth. An old one. The exact same kind we'd used as teenagers. Clara stopped immediately. "Oh no." "Oh yes." I recognized that tone. Danger. Complete danger. She pointed. "We have to." "We absolutely do not." "We absolutely do." 10 minutes later we were squeezed inside a booth clearly designed for people smaller than adults. The curtain closed. The camera light blinked. Clara immediately made a ridiculous face. I laughed. Flash. The first photo. Then she grabbed my arm. Flash. The second photo. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder. Flash. The third photo. Then everything slowed. Because for the final picture, neither of us looked at the camera. We looked at each other. Exactly like we had 17 years ago. Flash. The machine word. Printing. Clara stared at the strip when it emerged. Then smiled. A slow smile. The kind that hurts in the best possible way. "It's the same." I looked down. She was right. Not identical. Older. Wiser. A few more lines around our eyes. A few more scars. But the expression was exactly the same. Like we'd never stopped looking at each other that way. Clara carefully slipped the photo strip into her purse. Right beside the letter. Then we continued walking. neither of us noticing how late it had become. Until my phone buzzed. I glanced down. One message. From my mother. Did the birthday miracle survive dinner? Clara immediately laughed. I showed her the screen. She nearly doubled over. Birthday miracle? That's offensive. It's accurate. I typed back. Yes, she's still here. 3 dots appeared instantly. Then, good. Don't screw it up. I stared at the message. Then at Clara. Then started laughing. Because somehow my mother had summarized the entire situation perfectly. Clara squeezed my hand. You know. What? I like your family. I smiled. They like you too. She looked away, trying to hide a smile. Failing. Then she quietly said, I could get used to that. The words hit me harder than they should have. Because suddenly, I could picture it. Family dinners, road trips, lazy Sundays, movie nights, ordinary things. The beautiful ordinary things. The things I'd stopped imagining years ago. And for the first time, the future didn't feel empty. Felt full. Very full. Then Clara stopped walking. I turned toward her. What? She looked nervous. Again. Which somehow still surprised me. What? A slow breath. Then, can I ask you something? Anything. Her eyes met mine. And suddenly I knew. Whatever came next mattered. A lot. Because the smile disappeared. And in its place was something far more vulnerable. Hope. Real hope. Then she quietly asked, where do we go from here, Julian? And for the first time all day, the answer felt surprisingly easy. Where do we go from here, Julian? The question should have terrified me. A year ago it would have. Maybe even that morning. But now the answer felt obvious. I looked at Clara, the woman who had carried my letter for 17 years. The woman who had shown up at platform 3 when she could have stayed home. The woman who had just spent an entire day proving that some things don't disappear. They wait. I smiled, then said the first honest thing that came to mind. Breakfast. Clara blinked. What? Tomorrow. A pause. Breakfast. Her eyebrows lifted. That's your big answer? No. I took her hand. It's the beginning of my answer. The smile slowly returned. I continued. Then lunch next week. Another pause. Dinner after that. She laughed. I kept going. Movie nights. Road trips. Arguments about where to eat. Meeting your friends. You meeting mine. Ordinary stuff. Her eyes softened. Very quickly. Because she understood exactly what I meant. I wasn't talking about dates. I was talking about life. The life we'd almost missed. Clara squeezed my hand. And for a moment neither of us spoke. Then she smiled. A real smile. The kind that reaches all the way into someone's eyes. I'd like that. Good. Good. For some reason that made us both laugh. The tension disappeared. Again. It seemed to happen a lot around her. We walked for another hour. Talking. Not about the past this time. About tomorrow. About next month. About things we actually wanted. At one point Clara admitted she still wanted to publish a novel. At another point I confessed I'd always wanted to design my own house. She immediately volunteered opinions. Many opinions. Far too many opinions. By the time I drove her home, it was almost midnight. The city had grown quiet. Most lights were off. Most people were asleep. Neither of us wanted the night to end, which was becoming a recurring problem. We stopped outside her apartment building. The same place where 17 years of distance suddenly felt very small. Clara looked at me, then at the old letter still tucked inside her purse. Then back at me. A soft smile appeared. You know something? What? I almost threw this away once. My heart stopped. What? She laughed. I know. When? 5 years ago. I stared at her, completely horrified. Clara immediately started laughing. The kind of laugh that made it impossible to stay upset. I was moving. A pause. Packing boxes. Another pause. And I thought. She looked down. This is ridiculous. I nodded slowly. Reasonable. Painful. But reasonable. Then her smile softened. But I couldn't do it. The words came out almost as a whisper. I held it for 20 minutes. A pause. Then put it back. My chest tightened, because suddenly I could picture it. Perfectly. The apartment. The boxes. The years. The memories. One decision. One small decision. And somehow, everything that happened today depended on it. Clara looked at me. I think part of me always believed I'd see you again. The honesty nearly broke me, because part of me had believed the same thing. Even when it made no sense. Even when life moved on. Even when I told myself to let go. Hope is stubborn, especially when it's attached to the right person. A cool breeze moved through the street. Clara stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell her shampoo. Close enough that my heart started acting ridiculous again. Then she smiled. You know what else? What? Her eyes sparkled. The dangerous sparkle. The Clara sparkle. The one I'd never developed immunity to. I still have your senior year hoodie. My jaw dropped. No. Oh yes. Clara. It is extremely comfortable. I laughed so hard I nearly doubled over. You stole it. I borrowed it permanently. That's stealing. Legally complicated. Pointed at her. I'm getting it back. Good luck. Then she kissed me. Right there on the sidewalk. And suddenly, I didn't care about the hoodie anymore. When we finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine. The same way she'd done at the station. The same way she'd always fit. Like a missing piece finding its place again. Then she whispered, Happy birthday, Julian. I smiled. The biggest smile of the entire day. And quietly answered, Best one I've ever had. For the first time in 17 years, neither of us was waiting anymore. And that made all the difference.